In February 1959, 9 experienced Soviet hikers walked into the Ural Mountains. They never came back. When rescue teams finally found their camp weeks later, what they discovered made no sense. The tent had been slashed open from the inside. Every piece of equipment, every boot, every warm jacket left behind. 9 sets of footprints led away into the snow, barefoot, in temperatures of -30 degrees Celsius. And the bodies, when they were finally recovered, told a story that Russian investigators immediately classified and buried for decades. Crushed skulls, shattered ribs, injuries a medical examiner compared to a car crash with no car. One hiker found missing her tongue, low levels of radiation detected on their clothing. The Soviet government's official conclusion? An overwhelming force of nature. They closed the case, classified the files, and told the families nothing. 65 years later, scientists are still trying to figure out what really happened on that mountain. And the more they dig, the stranger it gets. To understand why this case is so disturbing, you first need to understand who these people were. This was not a group of amateurs. Igor Dyatlov was a 23-year-old engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, skilled, methodical, the kind of person other hikers trusted with their lives. His team of 8 were just like him. Young, strong, experienced in brutal winter conditions. Several had completed Category 3 treks before, the highest difficulty grade in Soviet mountaineering at the time. They set off on January 23, 1959, heading for Otorten Mountain in the northern Ural Range. Their route took them across the eastern slopes of a peak the local Mansi people had a name for long before any Soviet hiker arrived: Kholat Shachel. It translates to Mountain of the Dead. That name predates this incident by generations. The group documented everything. Their journals and photographs show a normal expedition. Snowball, fights at camp, smiling faces, careful notes on conditions and progress. On January 31st, they made camp at the base of Kholat Shachel and prepared to push higher the next morning. That was the last day anyone outside the group ever saw them alive. When they failed to send their scheduled telegram home, nobody panicked immediately. Delays happened. But when days turned into weeks with no word, the search teams went in. What they found changed everything. The tent was discovered on February 26th, nearly a month after the group had gone silent. It was partially collapsed and buried under snow, but it hadn't failed from outside pressure. Someone had cut through the fabric, multiple slashes made from inside the tent, as if the group had needed to escape in an extreme hurry and couldn't reach the entrance. Everything they owned was still inside. Food, stoves, boots, warm coats, ice picks. Their skis were stacked outside, still upright. Whatever happened, it happened fast. And it happened in the middle of the night. 9 sets of footprints led away from the tent down the slope toward a line of cedar trees about 1.5 kilometers away. Some prints were bare feet. Some showed a single sock. The tracks eventually disappeared under fresh snow. The first 2 bodies were found at the cedar tree. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, both in their underwear. A fire had been built, then burned out. The branches of the cedar tree had been broken off as high as 5 meters up, as if someone had climbed it, possibly to look back toward the tent, possibly to look for something else. 3 more bodies were found between the tree and the tent. Igor Dyatlov himself, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin spread apart as if each had been trying to crawl back toward camp alone. They died from hypothermia. Their faces were turned toward the tent. That left 4 hikers unaccounted for. They were found in May, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine 60 meters from the cedar tree. And these were the ones that changed everything. Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotarev, Alexander Kolovatov, and Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. The medical examiner's report was blunt. Thibault-Brignol had a severe skull fracture. Dubinina and Zolotarev had multiple broken ribs and extensive internal bleeding. The force required to cause those injuries, the examiner noted, was comparable to a high-speed car crash. But there were no external wounds, no bruising on the skin consistent with a physical struggle, no sign anyone had been struck by a person or an object they could identify, and Dubinina was missing her tongue and her eyes. The official explanation for that was scavengers, animals after death. Some researchers accept that. Others point out that no other soft tissue was disturbed in the same way. Then there was the radiation. When the clothing of several hikers was tested, it came back positive for low-level radioactive contamination. The Soviet investigators noted it. And then they buried the report, along with everything else. The case was closed. The families were told their children died from a natural force no one could explain. The files were sealed. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident attracted theories ranging from the plausible to the extreme. In recent years, science has gotten serious about it, and while researchers have made real progress, they still cannot explain everything. Here is where things stand. The avalanche theory is the current scientific consensus, and it is genuinely compelling. In 2021, 2 physicists from Swiss universities published a study modeling what would happen if a small slab of snow broke free from the slope above the tent during the night. A slab avalanche is different from the kind you picture in movies. It is not a wall of snow rolling down a mountain. It is a dense, compact layer, almost like a block, that slides on a weak layer beneath it. It can happen on relatively gentle slopes, and critically, it leaves almost no debris field behind. Their model showed that even a small slab pressing against the bodies of hikers pinned between it and the tent floor could produce exactly the kind of internal injuries found in the ravine group: broken ribs, crushed skulls, without leaving marks on the skin. It also explains the slashed tent. Panicking hikers, partially buried, unable to reach the entrance, cutting their way out in the dark. This is a serious scientific study, peer-reviewed, supported by follow-up expeditions that found evidence of recent small avalanches on the same slope. But it does not explain everything. Locals who had lived in that region for generations told investigators they had never seen an avalanche at that location. The slope angle, some argued, was not steep enough. And even if you accept the avalanche, you still have the radiation, you still have the missing tongue, and you still have the lights in the sky. Because here is something the mainstream coverage usually leaves out. On the same night the Dyatlov group died, another hiking party about 50 kilometers away reported seeing glowing orange spheres moving across the sky over the Ural Mountains. They logged it in their expedition diary. They were not the only ones. Similar reports came from other witnesses in the region that night. The Soviet Union was actively testing ballistic missiles and experimental weapons in the Ural region throughout the late 1950s. Some researchers believe the hikers may have unknowingly set up camp in or near a weapons testing corridor, and that whatever killed them came from above, not from the slope. This would explain the radiation. It would explain the pressure-based injuries with no external trauma. It would explain why the lead investigator, a man named Lev Ivanov, went silent for 30 years, and then, in 1990, finally spoke publicly and said he had been ordered to close the case and that he personally believed the flying spheres were connected to the deaths. A man who spent months at that site, who reviewed all the evidence firsthand, who was then told by his government to say nothing, came forward at the end of his career and said, "I think we were covering something up." There is also the infrasound theory. Some researchers have proposed that unusual wind patterns over the mountain's ridge could generate low-frequency sound waves below the range of human hearing that trigger sudden, overwhelming feelings of panic, dread, and disorientation. Infrasound has been documented to cause exactly these responses in controlled settings. It would explain the group's irrational flight from the tent without warm clothes, without logic, without stopping to think. But it does not explain the injuries. No single theory explains everything. That is the truth of the Dyatlov Pass incident. Every explanation covers some of the evidence and leaves some of it dangling. In 2019, 60 years after the incident, the Russian government reopened the investigation. After a year of review, they announced their conclusion. The hikers died as a result of a natural avalanche. Case closed. Again, the report made no mention of the radiation, no explanation for the internal injuries. without external wounds. No comment on the testimony of Lev Ivanov. No answer for the missing soft tissue or the lights in the sky, or why the original files had been sealed in the first place. 9 people, experienced, careful, young, walked into a mountain, and something ended them in the middle of the night. They ran barefoot into a blizzard rather than face whatever was behind them. We know the mountain's name meant Mountain of the Dead long before they arrived. We know the lead investigator believed something was hidden. We know the Russian government has now closed this case twice and answered almost nothing. Science has brought us closer to the truth, but closer is not the same as there. Whatever happened on Kholat Shachel on the night of February 1st, 1959, the 9 people who experienced it never got to tell anyone. So what do you think happened? An avalanche? A weapons test? Something else? Entirely. Drop your theory in the comments, because whatever the answer is, somebody clearly didn't want us finding it. If you want to go deeper on cases like this, real events, real science, real questions that nobody has fully answered, subscribe, because there are a lot more of them.